we have this kind of built-in desire to want to worship something outside
Yeah.
of ourselves. And if somebody takes that and hijacks it for their gain, right?
Yeah.
Their money, their sex, right? Like all these things. I think that's kind of where you get into this cult. Like,
Welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis,
and I'm Michael.
and we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. So the topics on this show range from theology, masculinity, movies, philosophy, books, pop culture, and many other subjects. We often talk about the people we admire and the wisdom that they share. People such as Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, who we believe is the sage of our time. Michael, what are we doing today?
Talking about cults versus religion. We've had a lot of interaction with our subscribers, our followers, and being that we grew up on a polygamist compound that we sometimes call a cult.
Or diet
One
cult.
of our
I like diet cult.
diet cult, yeah. That I mean, one gal commented, she's like, it doesn't sound like a cult, it just sounds like a family that lived on a ranch. And I mean, it's like,
Yeah, that's what it was.
yeah, I mean, I mean, maybe not. So we've had a lot of conversations around this, and we've had Nathan Diltz on, and he talked about, Mormonism and polygamy. And so we just wanted to kind of talk about, cult versus religion and kind of get into that. So,
And I'm going to read a couple of Britannica and Webster dictionary definitions that I saved because I think that kind of helps as a jumping off point.
yeah.
So the Britannica dictionary definition of a cult is a small religious group that is not part of a larger and more acceptable religion that has beliefs regarded by many people as extreme or dangerous. And that's that definition of a cult. And then Oxford Dictionary defines a cult as action or conduct indicated. Okay. Action or conduct indicating belief in obedience to and reverence for a god, gods, or similar superhuman powers.
Mhm.
So essentially, they're very close to each other. The
And
definitions.
it's interesting because in preparation for this video, I was watching and I didn't grab his name, but a video a guy put together, and he does studying into ancient cultures, which cult and culture actually stem from, I think it's cultus, which is the same Latin. They both are derived from the Latin word culturus. That the definition, yeah. So, which cult, which shares an origin with culture and cultivate, comes from the Latin cultus, a noun with a meaning ranging from tilling, cultivation, or training or education, to adoration in the English.
Well, and that's changed in our society because I think, and we like to, when we talk about the way we were raised, we like to kind of make light of it because it, there's the extremes and then there's the non-extremes, right? So I would say, like, many people like to paint the LDS church as a cult, but it's very, like I like to say, it's very cult light. It's very diet cult. It's not. And Jordan Peterson, I think it was Jordan Peterson who said this, who said, how do they treat the individual? Now,
Oh yeah.
is the individual being enlightened and getting good, and or are, like what Scientology does is they actually lock their people up, like in a, like if they like stray from the path. They actually lock them up and don't allow them to leave the grounds, so and that seems very. Joe Rogan and Brett Weinstein did a podcast a few years ago,
which is great.
and
yeah,
it's a great podcast, and they got into it about a cult versus a religion. And his point was that there's no difference because there's still, and Brett Weinstein, who isn't a religious person, but he's a biologist. He says, I believe the quote was, one is predatory and one is not.
There is the predatory version, which I would call a cult.
Right.
And there is the earnest version, which I would not call a cult. Now, I'm very uncomfortable with any of these things governing policy in the present because.
So whatever you deem as predatory would probably be equated with the cult mentality.
Yeah, and it's fun because their exchange is really interesting because Jordan Peters,
both
Joe,
atheists.
Yeah, they're both. Yeah, and Joe basically says that Catholicism is a cult.
Yeah,
and Brett not being religious, he's like, wait, whoa.
That's an extreme way of looking at it.
Let's talk about this. And Brett is a biologist. So the way he views it is more of like a kind of survival of the fittest sense of religion, right? So Darwin coming up with the survival of the fittest is that the one that in species, the strongest one survives, right? Well, in religions,
the strongest religion survives.
Yeah. So, and this kind of, go ahead.
Well, and they're both coming at it as non-religious people as well. And so naturally I think Brett was trying to get at was that if it enlightens people or if it makes their lives better, then it is a religion.
Well, he kind of says it, so I wrote it down. He says, religion. So a cult would be an organization that has become predatory, and a religion facilitates collaboration and disrupts processes. So it disrupts processes that cause infighting. So it to him, it's more about collaboration. So you get people together to collaborate. And I think that's his kind of view on religion just in general. If we all believe in a God, then we can collaborate better together, right? And that's probably how he would view it as a biologist. But yeah, so which I think in a sense we're kind of missing in our society right now.
Well, yeah, if we're well, and we it feels very much like our society is becoming more tribal, and religion originally like monotheistic religion was meant to bring people together, to make them unified in like one belief, right?
Well, and it's probably the strength of Catholicism versus like Judaism. Judaism more or less wanted just for one people, one culture, and that was what
the Jewish culture
kind of built for.
That was what it was built for. Whereas Catholicism was like, everybody can be part of this.
We're gonna gather
up everyone.
Doesn't matter. Greek.
That is interesting.
Like,
that's an interesting
doesn't matter.
thought.
You're coming into the fold, believing in Jesus. Now, obviously, the Catholic Church went through some real
horrific stuff at some point.
Yeah, Spanish
Well,
Inquisition.
and this is what they also cover this too, because any organization can have corruption. It doesn't matter if it's a religious organization or if it's a political organization or if it's a, it can have corruption. So what the point is that Brett is trying to say is that the religion survived the corruption. So if you think of like the Spanish Inquisition as this corrupt, bureaucratic ideology that was horrific to regular people, it eventually got out of that, and it's become this good force in the world right now.
Yeah.
I would say it's a good force in the world right now because it's like it's teaching, love and society and stuff like that.
Not that this is a very well-known book, but the book The Last Templar was about the sense that there was a time when the Catholic Church needed to be fought against, and that now the Catholic Church
doesn't need to be
fought against. Now, obviously, there's going to be people who hate the Catholic Church and do think it should be fought against, or the Mormon Church. I mean, for that matter, right? Who believe that the Mormon Church needs to be fought against.
Well, and it kind of goes back to the whole thing again. Is it providing good for the individual, or is it providing
or is it predatory?
Or is it predatory?
Yeah.
So
it's a tough, and it's a valid discussion to have. Because I mean, a couple times we've talked about some of the things that we don't like about, I guess, the LDS Church, but I mean, and we're seeing a time when there's been an exodus out of religions in general, just across the board,
and people discovering that is a bad thing. Because we don't
know that that's a good thing. Yeah.
Suicide rates are skyrocketing right now. And I think when people are in despair and don't believe in something outside of their own like reality right now, then they don't believe that there's any point in furthering our lives.
Yeah.
And so what
nihilism
what religion does
can creep in.
And what religion does is it brings something to you that gives you comfort in the hard times, right? Now, it's not, for some people, like rationalists, that they're going to have a hard time with that. They're just going to, and that's where the struggle comes in, right? We are Israel. We wrestle with God, and that's another good thing about it is like, and we've talked about this before, but I think Dennis Prager said this at one point. He basically points out that he told his Jewish Bible school teacher that he didn't want to pray. He didn't feel like praying. And the teacher was like, who cares if you feel like praying? Do it anyway. And then the whole point of that is that if you get into a repetition of it, that when you actually need it, when life gets you down and you need something in your life, that you've created the habit so that it's easier to do. Right. It's easier to be a part of a religion if you're constantly practicing it. I guess that's
there's a lot of scholars out there that would say something to the effect of that religion is just self-help for the masses, right? And I mean, I think that's not disparaging. I don't think, really, because it's like, hey, life is tough. We do need help through this, right? And sometimes we need each other, and sometimes we need a logos, an out there ethic, a higher power that we can aspire to, that can really help us. Get us through it. Yeah.
So why don't you read that quote that lady
Oh yeah,
Dave.
Megan Goodwin. So
She's a doctor.
Megan Goodwin is kind of just a scholar on new religious movements, and she said that cults basically equal religions I don't like, and we kind of get into this place, I think nowadays especially, where it's like, oh, you have a group of people that you agree with and you think with and you kind of go along with, and I don't like that group of people. Yeah, you're a cult.
You're a cult,
right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting because you and I are both students of Dr. Peterson, and what we noticed is that when we put this out there, a lot of the comments that like to talk about this kind of stuff, I don't know if you want to call them vultures, maybe you want to call them vultures, but they mentioned that we left one cult for another cult, right?
The Jordan Peterson cult.
The Jordan Peterson cult, which
Yeah.
is bogus, because I don't see him as a religious figure, although he does teach many religious things. I see him as a teacher.
Mhm.
That is the definition of what, as far as I believe, my beliefs towards him. Now, and by not seeing him as a deity or as a religious, what do you want to call it? Religious
saint kind of
saint,
thing,
whatever you
yeah, or
want to call
something
it.
like that. Yeah,
If
prophet.
he does something wrong, then I'm okay with saying, okay, now maybe I move on to something else. If he
Mhm.
ends up doing something completely, I don't think he is, because he's a person. He's not a person I know, but because he's a person, he's going to make a mistake, right? And he has made a few mistakes in the past. He gets in trouble on Twitter a lot. And I don't condone those mistakes, but I also get the reasons why he does them. So if I was a zealot, I would believe everything that he said, and I would not scrutinize any of it. That's what a zealot does.
Yeah. And also the definition of one definition I heard of a cult, and I'm paraphrasing, but it basically was that if you have a group that that demands from its followers that they do not associate with people outside of the group, as well as they, if someone questions or breaks away from the group, they become ostracized. So like you and I, if we met somebody that was a fan of Jordan Peterson and then decided that down the road he wasn't a fan of Jordan Peterson anymore, it's not like we would find a need to ostracize this person,
to keep
I
him
think,
like not be around him anymore. And
oh,
like,
you can't talk to other Jordan Peterson fans because you will pollute their mind. I have to stop you.
I have to,
right?
This is where religion separates people from their families, right?
Well,
a cult.
Well,
I guess a cult would
a,
separate people from their families.
A cult, and this maybe goes into another kind of type of definition of a cult, and I can't remember. I want to say it was Megan Goodwin that had this definition, because I read a few quotes of hers, that another definition of a cult would be that a cult strives to definitely make sure that it is separate from the overall culture, and whereas a religion actually has
tries to integrate itself into the culture.
Itself, yes, into
this
the
this
culture.
is the reason why Mormonism had to get rid of polygamy, because polygamy was such a hot topic in the 1800s. They couldn't integrate themselves into the culture, and so they got rid of polygamy, and they're integrated into the culture to the point where now everybody knows the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church is what, 11 million people, I believe. I'm just pulling numbers out, but
and I've had conversations with people that think it should probably be more like 5 million. That 5 million is being generous. I don't know. They claim 16 million, I think.
But
But that's on
they're
a
the
standard
second
of
biggest church in the United States, right? Just under the Catholic Church.
just under the Catholic Church.
That's what I
don't know.
thought.
That'd probably be a good thing to look up.
Yeah.
But there's the way they count the numbers. Somebody could be baptized and then just never go back again.
Oh yeah, okay.
And like
so
their family leaves or
tell.
whatever, and they just don't get around to going and asking for their whatever their name to be removed from the records or whatever.
Yeah.
So those, and if they're going off of those numbers, you've got somebody who was baptized when they were 8 and has never done anything with the Mormon church ever since.
Yeah.
And they're counting them as a member. It's like, so we don't really, I guess we just don't really know exactly the number, but this
is one of the reasons I like to call it diet cult, because with the whole point is that people get good out of the Mormon church, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is the Mormon church isn't trying to tell their members, like, if you join this church, don't cut your family. Now, some people might be trying to do that, but one of the tenets of a cult is that they make you, once you join, you're not allowed to talk to the people who you were close with at one point who may have a problem with the church, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something Scientology does. Scientology tells their members to come in. Once you've joined, you can't talk to anybody who's not a member of this organization.
Yeah, and they're not supposed to be on the internet. They're not supposed to have access to or apparently this is from Aaron Smith Levin.
Okay.
He's a guy that left Scientology, and he's on Lex Friedman's podcast, and it's very, very interesting. And that, hands down, I feel like he was in much more of a cult than we were.
Yeah.
Listening to his story, I'm just like, wow,
that's full on.
We
cult,
were not
right?
that bad.
Yeah. Well, it's full on cult. If you get out of line, they actually lock you up.
Is that what he was saying? Is that when they do the testing with the?
Well, that's to like get you started, I guess. But they actually lock you up, and you're not. So one of the worst things you can do to a human being is keep them from other human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Rogan's actually talked about this before. That's why they have solitary confinement in prisons.
Yeah.
Is because that is one of the worst things you can do to a human being.
That's the punishment.
That's the punishment, is keep them. And now some people are okay with it. Some people, that's the guy that ends up getting into solitary confinement and just sitting there all day long. But for the most part, it drives people crazy. And so that's one of the reasons, one of the tenets of a cult would be to pull you away from your special to those people. Like if
they're special.
So there's a documentary on Scientology called Going Clear. I believe it's on HBO Max. And then there's also The Vow, which is on HBO Max. Now I watched their first season, and it's basically I forget the name of the group, but it's a boring series, so I wouldn't suggest it, because it's just talking heads. There's not a lot to it. But eventually this guy named Rainier got these people involved, and it was supposed to be like a self-help kind of like a Tony Robbins kind of thing. And eventually he got some of the women to get so enamored with him that they would do anything he said. And he got them to brand each other like property of him.
Jeez.
Of the logo of the of whatever the name of the
business or cult or whatever.
Well, that's how it was kind of pushed. And there's tons of footage out there.
Is that The Vow? Is that The Vow?
That's The Vow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
okay.
I forget the name of the group, but the actual documentary series is interesting, but at the same time super boring. Like it was just like it was a slog to get through. And I finally was like, because they had a second season come out, and I'm like, I'm not watching that thing. I think I got what I want, because if it's as boring as the first season. But anyway,
well, and I think that goes back to what Brett said about like a predatory, like so I feel like as humans, we do have a kind of evolutionarily built in inclination for the divine, right? Something outside of ourselves that we desire to worship. And so if somebody is to try and hijack that, we have this kind of built-in desire to want to worship something outside of ourselves. And if somebody takes that and hijacks it for their gain, right?
Yeah.
Their money, their sex, right? Like all these things. I think that's kind of where you get into this cult, like cult mentality, building a cult. I mean, and then you get into
and people,
Jim Jones.
Yeah, people use the argument with the Catholic Church, the whole scandal in Boston with the sexual abuse. I think it was Boston. It was on the East Coast. And that whole scandal that happened, I believe it was the 90s. The Catholic Church didn't handle it well. They didn't do right. And the fact that that puts a lot of people off. So whenever there's a scandal in a legitimate religion that has, like Brett Weinstein says, that every organization has a little bit of corruption, but that corruption was bad enough that people just decided, oh, this is a cult, and we need to what do you call it? Tear the whole thing down. And Jordan Peterson uses this all the time. You're gonna throw the wheat out with the chaff, or the baby out with the bathwater. Like, what is that? What you're gonna do? Because there's good things about it that we can glean wisdom from.
Yeah,
and because of a couple of nefarious people, you're gonna throw it all out completely. So that's the whole point with what we're doing here and discussing this. So
well, and to be honest. And I think I listened to Lex Friedman's podcast with Aaron Smith Levin on Scientology, him leaving Scientology. And then I also listened to Lex Friedman's podcast with Bishop Robert Barron. And it was kind of right after each other. And I was kind of like, with everything Bishop Barron's saying, maybe I'm Catholic.
Because you're agreeing with what he's saying.
I'm kind of like, this sounds, sounds pretty good. So the difference, like the kind of just seeing those two contrasts together. And now obviously this is coming from a guy that was talking anti Scientology. And if they were to have somebody out there on to talk pro Scientology, there might be, he might sell it to where it's I'm like, well, I agree with a lot of that stuff. In fact, Lex Friedman in the podcast was kind of, he played devil's advocate a little bit and was like, well, I kind of believe that. Like, that sounds like that makes sense. But once again, it sounds like you take these good ideas, you take these things that, parts of us that believe there's something out there that we desire to worship, and you hijack it for
for nefarious reasons, right?
Yeah.
So I guess what the definition would be is like, in a religion you can have corruption, but the religion isn't controlled by the corruption, right? So the religion can course correct, it can become better, it can do, but if the corruption is the religion, like Scientology,
Mm.
Maybe that's a better definition. So maybe corruption of an organization doesn't define the organization. But if it is a corrupt organization to begin with and it stays corrupt, that's the definition of a cult.
Maybe, yeah, interesting. I mean, along a little bit along those lines, what did you think of Brett when he said, he basically was like, we don't know about Scientology if it's a cult yet, time will tell.
Time
He
will
was
tell.
basically was saying something to the effect of, and
he may not, I don't know if he knows enough about it, because I have watched these documentaries and I've talked, like there's a ton of people who've excuse me, who've left the Scientology church, who are like, we actually we had to give everything up to it. Like there was no autonomy. I think that's another thing that defines a religion versus a cult. If you have to give everything up to the organization, then it's a cult. If you are still your own human being within the religion, then that's a religion. Because like unless somebody wears a cross or says I'm Catholic, you're not going to know that they're Catholic. Right. Or they say I go to church, once a week or whatever. But as Scientologists, and you may not know that they're a Scientologist until they tell it. But if they're completely devoted to the religion, you won't even see them. You won't even have an interaction with them. Right.
Right. I mean,
because they're not allowed to have interactions with people. I don't know. I don't know the details on that, because like Tom Cruise is a Scientologist. He's the most famous Scientologist, and you see when he's interacting with people. So does he get special privileges because he's the most famous Scientologist?
Aaron Smith-Levin does mention that basically Scientology provides all of Tom Cruise's staff. That basically everybody that works
for him
directly with him is a Scientologist.
So they're like spying on him constantly.
No idea. I mean, obviously he has interactions with other actors and other people who are not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
interesting.
And I don't want to hate, because like I love his movies, and I
love his movies too.
It's fun, and I'm not saying he's the greatest actor ever, but like I love his stuff. So I
don't think he's made a bad movie in a long time. Like almost every movie he's come out with in the last little while, I've loved. I thought they were excellent. So it's not.
Yeah.
It's hard to say whether he seems like a recruiter for the Scientology church more than anything, as far as his involvement in it, I don't know.
Yeah,
we got a glimpse, 15 years ago. We got a glimpse of how crazy it was, and Steven Spielberg came out and said that it hurt his film and all that kind of stuff. When
he had the interview, when he talked about it a little bit.
Well, yeah, I jumped on the couch and all that kind of stuff. That was all around about the same time.
That's right.
But yeah, you were gonna say something about Jim Jones.
A little bit of research on Jim Jones and that whole thing. I actually,
what was the name of his group?
It was the People's Temple. Okay. was the name of his group. Now, for those who don't know, Jim Jones started the People's Temple in the U.S. They ended up going to another country. I can't remember. They all up and moved to another country in South America, I think. And they started basically a compound there, which eventually led to in 1978 led to a mass suicide. Where
is that the drinking the Kool-Aid people?
Drinking the Kool-Aid, yeah.
Well, so isn't it weird that a turn of phrase, like most turn of phrases, happened way like in the 1800s back, but that turn of phrase happened like when people say when you're drinking the Kool-Aid, they're referring to that incident that happened
that's
in
where
the 70s.
that's where it comes from. Now, it wasn't actually Kool-Aid. That's one kind of historical thing. It's a fallacy. Yeah. It was kind of a competitor at the time that was a sweet drink, sugary sweet drink.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't Kool-Aid. So
well,
poor Kool-Aid getting the bad rap.
Yeah, poor Kool-Aid. But it's yeah.
And the phrase
so how many people
the Kool-Aid just means the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid just means that you are bought in, and you're going to do and believe whatever this person, this organization says.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think that that could be drinking the Kool-Aid could be for a lot of people that I mean, that could be for Republicans, it could be for Democrats, it could be for Apple users, it could be for Samsung users, right?
And
this might be a definition that we want to just touch on here, is just that if you are, I mean, even an Apple user could technically be defined as cult mentality.
Yeah.
For the fact that they won't even date somebody that has a Samsung. I can't remember the
I've never
comedian,
heard that,
but he said there was a comedian that was just like, I texted this girl and she texted me back and it was green. And he's like, I never text her again because just not going to go there.
Well, it's a joke, obviously, but it's like
it's a joke. But he's like, and my Apple phone could wake up, could get up at 4:30 in the morning every day and punch me in the face, and I still wouldn't switch.
Wait till that company becomes so bad that so the history, like, just a tangent here, but history has shown that companies tend to falter after 50 years or I want to say 100 years, because like at one point GE was the biggest company in the world, and now it's Apple and Amazon. So it's like, how long is it going to be before they're no longer the biggest company in the world? Anyway,
who knows?
That's a tangent.
But yeah, anyway, so there could be cult-like mentality all over.
Human beings want a tribe, right?
Yeah,
that's the problem.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying about we have a like an evolutionary desire to, you know, overall ethic, believe in something higher than ourselves, a tribe, right? There's all these human built-in things that we love that can be nefariously hijacked. We see this in Jim Jones. I mean,
what were the tenets of their faith?
Some of it was like, I mean, this is his rise in the 70s and the 60s and the 70s, being that we're all the kind of like that we're all the children of God, and this was at the height of racial problems, racism,
the civil rights movement,
and so he was kind of you know, preaching this thing of that we all treat each other equally, etc. So there were buy-ins that were good things, and there's a little snippet, a little clip of a gal that was like, you know, I was addicted to drugs, and this religion or Jim Jones helped me get off of drugs, and now I'm going to school and I'm bettering myself and all these things. Well, I mean, he moves them out there to the middle of nowhere and convinces them that they're gonna do this mass suicide. And he even said this was probably one of the first things that got me, because I wrote this little piece about it, and I was kind of attributing it to my own faith a little bit, and that was that and it just kind of opened, reading the story kind of opened my eyes a little bit. Hearing, so I listened to him talk where he told them that this is something you have to do because I'm a prophet, and God is telling you to do this. Yeah, it was.
Did it start
crazy.
out corrupt, or did it become corrupt?
I don't think so. I think it became corrupt. I mean, who knows? Like, he may have been corrupt. Jim Jones might have been corrupt at the very beginning. And it's been a while since I've done the research into it to kind of have an opinion on it. But and I can't even remember how many people died. One thing that was interesting was that not all of them wanted to do it. I mean, the parents were forcing the children to drink it.
Geez.
And they were afraid that the authorities were going to come out and basically like ruin their little heaven. And so that was kind of a fear thing. And then it went down. Some people survived. Some people kind of just like got out in time.
Or didn't drink it when it drank the Kool-Aid,
I mean, or just got out
before that happened,
before they were forced to drink it, obviously.
Yeah.
Like,
jeez.
So
it kind of goes back to
actually, when I was researching it, you could listen to audio of them forcing people to drink it, and you got people crying, and
that's horrible.
Oh, yeah. You go to a dark place, you can. Yeah, it can take you to a dark place.
And that goes back to the definition of like, how does it treat its individuals?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you could take communism as a cult, because communism always ends up treating the individual as a part of a group, collective. And then you have no autonomy. You were just part of the party. You stand in line, you toe the line. So that's
then becomes predatory.
And then it becomes
going back
predatory.
to Brett Weinstein. Yeah.
So I really think that the definition really it comes down to how it treats the individual, and is it predatory in nature? Because you could argue that they all start out being like having the ideal of doing better and stuff like that, but then maybe and I don't think Scientology started out that way. I think L. Ron Hubbard was getting taxed to death and was trying, because he had written like 500 books or something like that. And he was like,
so he wanted tax exempt status.
Tax exempt status. And so he found a way to do it. I think that in itself, not to say that great things about, but that's a brilliant way to get, find a way to get out of doing your taxes, I guess.
Sure.
If you're that, hung up about it. But he was a grandiosity kind of guy. He told really great stories and wanted to be known as like a hero of the Republic and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I heard this definition that cult plus time equals religion. And this would go back to kind of Brett Weinstein's kind of survival of the fittest, being survival of the fittest with religions,
are the religions that stand the test of time.
Basically that religions
this could actually happen to Scientology if they shaped up and they stopped isolating people and they stopped kind of enslaving people. If they stopped doing all of that and still kept their whole hokey pokey, like aliens came down and all that kind of stuff, that they could become a legitimate religion, because that's essentially what Mormonism did, right? So they had a few things that people didn't like, People didn't like the Adam God doctrine. People didn't like the polygamy.
Polygamy. Yeah.
And so they got rid of those, right? And now they're a legitimate religion. So, I mean, I think Brett Weinstein has something there in that thought. A lot of people will argue, here's one thing that I want to talk about. So a lot of going through this journey of making this the channel and everything, I realized that many people equate a or conflate. I am not sure, but like the whole idea of like you must control your bodily urges, they equate that with you are holding me back and causing harm to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it it's this fragile society that we are in, right? So one of the biggest complaints about the LDS church is like it's what is it? It's like don't have sex before marriage,
Mm-hmm.
right? And our society nowadays is like have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want, however you want. But there's a lot of people out there who, if they follow that, their life becomes chaotic, right? If you are
Mm-hmm.
if you are some dude who's got a bunch of baby mamas out there
Mm-hmm.
who's doesn't care about those kids, you are creating a there's a video I just watched about a guy who's bragging about 7 kids from 7 different women, and he's
Mm-hmm.
not helping out with any of them. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
you have 7 different kids who are going because they don't have a father in their life, and because their father's a D-bag, they're going to perpetuate that in some way. Either they're going to have, out of 7, you might have 1 that goes on and becomes successful and has a good life. But 6 of those kids, on average, they're going to have terrible lives. They're going to be in and out of prison. They're also going to have baby mamas or be women who have babies out of wedlock. And it's just this perpetuated gross thing. So where in all of that is, hey, don't have sex before marriage a bad thing? Maybe you should have sex with one person instead of a bunch of people. Because what you've done by feeding into your base instincts is you've created 7 generation or 7 people, and then you have their generation that's gonna. So it's ongoing. It's the chaos of ongoing hedonistic give into my impulses. And so religion tells you not to do these things, and then people conflate that with I wasn't allowed to be myself in my religion, so
Mm-hmm.
it's caused harm to me, and I now hate religion.
Yeah.
But unless you were actually physically beaten or put in a dungeon by your religion, maybe it didn't harm you.
Was it also horrible?
Was it that
Was it
horrible?
was it so horrible that you were encouraged and taught to you know uh sleep with someone that you love and have a commitment with them and rear
raise
children with
them?
I
Like,
was
is that such a bad thing? Like, so what I'm trying to get at, I guess, is like in this in our current society, it's kind of looked down upon to have restraint on your base instincts, right? I mean, it's like that's really what it comes down to. The restraint is a huge problem in our society, because everybody's basically told to give into these beliefs, give into these urges,
if it feels good, do it.
Yeah, if it feels good, do it, I mean, the murder rates are higher now. I mean, so people don't value life in general. I mean,
I don't think murder rates are higher.
yeah, they came out.
Suicide rates are, but
suicide rates and murder murder in specific cities has skyrocketed. I don't know about across the country, but murder rates are higher after COVID. But suicide rates are really high. And part of that, again, like, so I kind of tend to roll my eyes at people who go, I was traumatized by my religion. Oh, well, how are you traumatized by your religion? And they go, oh, they didn't allow me to have sex with who I wanted to. That traumatized you? What? Or they made me feel bad for having sex when I was young. What? They didn't punch you in the face. Or, that's trauma.
Maybe they made me feel bad. Yeah.
That made me feel bad. So I don't know. There's a lot of this is a third rail that a lot of people don't like to get into, but I mean, it's I think what it really comes down to is how it treats the individual, but also people conflate that, right?
Well, and also how it treats the family. So one quote that I saw, I can't remember who said this, but basically said that the future generations will be religious because they're the only one having kids. Something to that effect. Right.
Oh yeah. So the people who are having kids right now will also be religious people, but people who are non-religious tend to not have children.
Right.
Which
I think
I don't know.
What he was...
even Sam Harris, who's like the godfather of atheism, he's got a daughter. So I don't know how accurate that is.
I'm not sure. I did read a stat in one of our earlier videos that said that religious people, religious women tend to have more children.
Yeah.
And maybe this we kind of talked about the birth gap and how that's gonna be a problem for society, and that might just be a partial result of the exodus out of religions.
Mm-hmm.
So you have an exodus out of religions. Now these people, there's less commitment in relationships, right? Because you're having sex without marriage. And then that kind of facilitates just not the perfect system or time to have kids. So women go through all these relationships and then they age out of childbearing years. And which I thought the stats on that were kind of crazy on like how quickly it becomes harder and harder for women to have children.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we don't need it. That's another video, but we're talking about cults and religions. But in theory, if we wanted to see a jump back to replacement level birth rates, then we might want to see a return to religious belief.
Yeah, and they kind of go hand in hand, right? It's like, and people tend to be burned early in life, later in life go back to a religious belief. So that if they're burned early,
we did talk about like it does seem like people have a problem with religion when they've been burned by somebody in it a lot of times. And that might be kind of that, it might be a cult mentality within the religion, right?
Yeah.
I had a time I was talking with a bunch of friends of mine. We all grew up in this polygamist religion, a cult, diet cult. And one
it's going to catch on, Michael. It's going to catch on.
and one is still in it, and one has completely left it altogether. And hearing kind of the two different sides talking about it, one that is still in it was talking about how his childhood growing up in it was completely different than
he had a good childhood. And
he
then
had a
the
good
one,
childhood. He was allowed to play video games. He was allowed to watch movies. Like, he went to public school.
yeah.
Completely different.
And the one who's not in it
Wasn't allowed to go to school.
wasn't allowed to
He
go to
wasn't allowed
school.
and he was burned.
Oh my gosh.
He was burned.
That is so interesting.
So his father had the cult mentality in his heart, and where the other guy's father didn't.
Well,
so they
okay, so it goes back to the
different,
like, have you heard the analogy? If you hold a bird too tight, you squish it, and if you don't hold it tight enough, it flies away.
It flies away.
So there's this balance in between,
maybe,
that wasn't met with either one of them. So the one still in the religion, and then the one that's left the religion he was held too tight, right? I mean, that could be a perfect analogy for that. Yeah, that's interesting. That is so dang interesting, because that oh man.
And this one friend he spent some time on the compound, but he didn't grow up on our
the
ranch compound thing,
mm-hmm.
Polygamous compound, and so his experience was just so much different being raised in it than ours was, and he has no problem still being in it.
Still being in it.
And he gains, and like, hearing him talk about it, like, he gains value. He has friends in it, and it's a community, and which like, having left it, I kind of miss, right? I kind of miss the community. I kind of miss this being able to, gather together and worship together. And
I think Jordan Peterson said this, that when people do leave religions, that's the number one thing that they miss, is the community of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're animals that we're made to live in communities. But I think we can wrap it up. Do you have any final thoughts?
Couple final thoughts. And this I find I think, and I have this kind of belief that in the Bible, there's actually built-in mechanisms to go against a cult. And so hear me out here. And I came up with this thinking about Jim Jones and that whole debacle, people dying, mass suicide. That and I kind of wrote this out in this blog post that I did, and it was and I think I titled it, I can't remember if I titled it, if God can be questioned, if God can be questioned, every man should be. Okay. And there should basis be no of that
totalitarianism.
The basis of that is a story in the Bible, in Exodus, and I kind of can't wait until Jordan Peterson in their Exodus seminar talk about it. But there's a moment where the children of Israel sin against God, and God decides that he wants to destroy the children of Israel and start over. And Moses talks God out of it. So let me just read it.
This isn't the first time that it's ever happened, right? It happened with Lot.
I mean, in a sense, yes, Abraham talked God out of destroying Sodom and Gomorrah if he could find, he bargained with God about it.
Bargained with God.
And I guess I could read it. Maybe that we could save that for another time. But it's Exodus 32, verses 9 through 14. Yeah, basically Moses talks God out of destroying the children of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And then God repents of his decision to destroy the children of Israel. Okay. So, and also down the road, Moses has a quote where he says, God would that all men were prophets. So there's this a little bit built into the story of one,
like a check and balance.
Something, there's something there that
So
should be able to be used against cult mentality.
If men are given power, they should always, their subjects should always be able to question that power.
In theory, yes. From these two stories, what I'm gleaning from these two stories is that if God can be questioned, every man should be. And if God would that all men were prophets. Now, in the story, the way I see it from Moses, basically what happens is Moses has these 70 elders that go up with him to basically meet God. And then, so basically these guys are all kind of the higher ups of Israel. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those guys, or a couple of them, come to Moses and they're like, hey, we've got these guys in camp, they're prophesying, and they're not part of our 70. They're not part of our in group.
Yeah.
You need to go stop them. And Moses is kind of like, whoa, wait, on my account? Are you saying I should stop them on my account? Like, why would I stop these guys from prophesying? Now, if you understand, if you dig deep into the story, it feels like to me that these guys are basically saying, we are the leaders.
You are
Moses,
not.
you need
this new guy coming into town preaching is not the leader, and
He's
we
not
need
a
to take
leader.
him out.
We got to withhold our power over the people.
Yeah.
We've got our power over the people, and therefore you should stop these guys that are prophesying in the camp. And Moses, he's like, no, God would that all men were prophets. So I'm not going to like a tyrant, like a totalitarian, go stop these guys from, and who the hell knows what they were preaching. Like, I don't think it matters. So allow it to be out there for the, and this,
well, and this is also what happens in the economy. They always say, like, a good business will thrive and a bad business will die. So if it's a good religion, it should thrive. If it's a bad, and that's
thriving ideas,
that's what Weinstein is trying to get to, is he's like a bad religion will eventually peter out.
Yeah. And he even mentions that there was a similar religion that was a competitor to Joseph Smith in the early 1800s.
Yeah.
That he never got more than like 30 followers.
Yeah.
And it petered out. So what the hell? Was there something that, and I feel like, and this is, I think I've said this before, but I feel like there was kind of an essence, there was something that Joseph Smith was tapping into that speaks to people. Mm-hmm. And good or bad, tyrannical, did he start to become a tyrant? I mean, this goes back to, like, are you going to become the tyrant? Or are you going to be like,
well, you're the
prophet of prophets, kind of at the beginning of it, of like Moses saying, God would that all men were prophets. Like, why would I stop these guys
and power
from having their opinion?
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that might have been what happened with Joseph Smith, right? He started out in good intentions and then, got corrupt. That's the whole thing with Weinstein is he's trying to point out that every organization has corruption. If it survives the corruption, then maybe we can call that a religion.
Maybe.
And a cult can't survive corruption if it's nefarious intents on human beings. Like, but that's where people mix up the whole idea of like, you're keeping me from my base instincts, so that's what's keeping me from. It's a weird complicated scenario where the people always conflate the restraint on their ability as a corrupt religion, right? So it's a
cult is just what I don't like.
Cult is just the religion I don't like. That might be true,
right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
And so, it's not even to, you could get into basically any organization of human beings could be considered a cult.
Which is why I think we should revisit this. I think we should do a
part 2
every so often, do an episode on this.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
that's some interesting stuff. The socials. Do we have that?
Follow us on Twitter, Brothers V Random. YouTube, the Brothers Random. Obviously, you're here. So the Brothers Random on Rumble. So we are on Rumble. Instagram is @the Brothers Random. Our email is thebrothersrandomv@gmail.com.
Yeah, send us an email. Tell us what you think about the show. The begs happen now, so subscribe and like and share with your friends. Also, we have Apple we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and that's it. Until next time, brother, keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, learn more. See ya.